Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to being 45 days into quarantine and not having actually pulled all my hair out yet. Otherwise known as a Warframe guide. We love them, we want them, we need them. RIvens! This video is all about those beautiful purple nuggets, kind of like my shirt, of joy that DE throws our way to excel our builds, to sell for platinum, or just generally confound us with how the hell we're meant to get 3 headshots in a single aim glide with using a Lex, or how the hell we're meant to synthesize a Samaris target with a bleeding dragon key on without using abilities. RIvens are by far and away one of the most polarizing elements of Warframe, not only offering avenues for people to excel their builds with, but also providing a substantial amount of Warframe's overall platinum economy, if you look at the grand scheme of the marketplace especially. So in this video, we are going to look at everything you are going to need to know about RIvens so that you can utilize them to their fullest. So just what are RIvens? Well, RIvens are essentially a unique classification of high-value mod within Warframe. These mods, once obtained, will be classified into different categories, i.e. primary, secondary, and melee, and even subcategories like shotguns, kick guns, and Zors. There are some others as well, but we'll talk about that more later. The point being here is that RIvens will initially be veiled, meaning it won't have any initial stats on it. For you to get this Riven open, you need to equip it to a weapon of that category. Although, in the case of shotguns, you can still put them on a primary. Zors can still be put on melee, and kick guns can still be put on any gun for that matter. Once it's on a weapon, you then complete the challenge it gives you. You don't even need to complete the challenge with that gun, so to say. As is the case with the aforementioned 3 headshots in a single aim glide, if you had that veiled Riven on your pistol, you can actually just pull out your primary and do the challenge with your primary instead. The challenges you will get will have a wide variety of requirements and will range in difficulty from asking you to simply fish some fish or collect some Syndic medallions to the insanity of killing X amount of Dargon pilots before hitting the ground. All the while, these challenges can be additionally added with affixes such as whilst having a dragon key equipped, or while sliding, or while alone. Suffice to say, these challenges can be quite, well, challenging. And with such a wide variety of challenges, you have to take it as a situation-by-situation basis as to how to approach each of them. And if you have one which is simply out of your skill set or ability to complete, you can just sell them in their veiled state for a guaranteed small amount of platinum on the marketplace. And realistically speaking here, we will very likely end up making a video covering all the grand scheme of these tests in the near future, but trying to cover each and every type of test will take probably about an hour, if not more. Once a Riven has been opened, the Riven itself will roll itself into one random weapon of that category it was based on, i.e. if it was a rifle Riven, it could be anything from a Soma Riven to a Rubico Riven. These Rivens are expensive in terms of capacity and usage, and only one Riven can be equipped at any given time. So you'll want to make sure you have some former preserved to plan out your build when using one of these. On top of that, the mastery requirement for these are not set. They will range from Master Rank 8 to Master Rank 16. So the idea here is you want to make sure you plan out your builds and understand when is the best time to use them. Each unveiled Riven will then have a list of randomized stats. Now, the stats are rather interesting, so listen to Uncle Kari tell you a lovely little story about the stats on Rivens. So right off the bat, you'll notice that when you unveil a Riven, the stats will be incredibly random in terms of the ratio of stats and just what the stats are. So these the number and the power of the amount of stats you get is dictated by disposition. Now, disposition, in short, is the dictation of how powerful your rolls will become. Every weapon in Warframe has disposition. No matter what, no matter how new, no matter how old. The disposition is often dictated by the popularity of the weapon. And the more disposition a weapon has, the more stats it will gain whilst being rolled. Bearing in mind that any Riven can only have a maximum of 4 stats, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. The actual amount of these stats, though, being dictated by the disposition means the disposition can dictate just whether a Riven is going to be worthwhile using or not. This often ends up showing that lesser used weapons, the ones that have the higher disposition, will often be more powerful with the Riven than the more used weapons that have lower disposition. So in short, more used weapons have a lower disposition in general, and less used weapons have a higher disposition, making those lesser used weapons more potent, and the weaker weapons still more powerful, but not nearly as needing of a Riven to make their potency higher. You can tell the disposition of a weapon if you equip the weapon on the side, and you'll see these little pips pop up next to the statistics on the left. And again, very easily dictated by how many pips each has, will then dictate the disposition of the weapon. And hey, if you don't like the stats of a Riven, or maybe the stats roll too low and you want to try and up those stats a bit more, well, you can use, and I do stress this, to re-roll them. Going to your foundry and selecting a Riven you wish to cycle the stats of, you'll be given an option at the top. Rolling a Riven for the first time will set you back 900 Kuva, and thusly increase by 300 each additional reroll, up to a maximum of 3,500 Kuva per roll. So if you want to dab your hand at what is essentially gambling with red money to increase your potency or value of Rivens, this has your back. And possible trip to AAA about new addictions of gambling. DE, I do wonder if you're projecting something here. As a final note here, it is worth mentioning that the numbers are never set. They can be higher or lower with each roll. You are very, very unlikely to get the exact same roll 2 times in a row, even if you get the same category of stats in that second roll. So always take into consideration, there is always going to be a better roll out there, which is where this addiction kind of comes from, really. But Makari, where do we get these Rivens from? Well, little Billy, I wish I could say that they are handily found down the side of couch cushions like lost loose change, but they are in fact found in a multitude of different and far more mundane fashions. Most notably, the main way 90% of us will get our Rivens will be from the Sorties, that set of 3 missions you get access to once you've completed the War Within. Completing the sorties will give you a chance of a Riven, shown on screen now with the percentages. It's a bit of a nuanced thing here, but you'll get a general idea as your chance of getting each one. But that's not the only way. Thank F for that. Recently, they added Requiem Fissures. These missions are added so that you can farm out the Parazon mods. And one of the rewards you get from opening a Requiem relic are Riven slithers. These slithers are pretty common reward from both Requiem relics and from doing Railjack missions. Taking 10 of these slithers to Paladino on the Iron Wake will trade for a new Veiled Riven. But this can only be done once a week, so it's just an added extra method you can take for farming out those slithers to get a bit of added Riven revenue, if you will. I should copyright that. Riven revenue. Outside of that, the only other way to get Rivens are via the Gift of the Lotus events that happen at special events or after dev streams, from tactical alerts. And that's actually it. That is all of your ways of getting Rivens for the most part, unless DE decides to put something random in the game. There is actually a side note where you can also get Rivens from completing quests you already have the reward for. Say, for example, you have Octavia already because you bought her for Platinum, and then you complete her quest for the first time, you'll get a Riven instead of the frame reward. And as a side note, Arcwing Rivens come from arbitration rewards from the Arbiters of Hexus vendor on any relay station. And then Companion Rivens, on the other hand, come from Cephalon Simaris rep rewards from Cephalon himself. Now, the next part of this guide is going to be a bit more subjective, and really, I just want to cover the base nuance, going into detail about the way to determine the value of a Riven. Because the value of a Riven can be a tough one to determine. But I want to go through some pointers about how you determine the value of a Riven and how to determine if a Riven is worth using based on the stats it has. In terms of the pricing, there is really no determined price for any Riven, and the prices are always fluctuating. So the TLDR of what we're going to go through is simply to just make sure you are keeping up to date with the trends and marketplace as a whole, utilizing websites such as Semlar's Riven Valuer, and the Riven Marketplace. And also then the in-game chat to get a general idea of prices. This does require you to put a lot of effort in to have an understanding of prices, but utilizing the outside resources will definitely help you. But if you want to be sure you're selling your Riven for the right amount, always double check what other people are selling it for first. Then, if it doesn't sell after a little while for your price, lower the price by a few platinum every so often. and then hopefully on your next attempt you'll sell it. If not, then you just lower it by little every time. Unfortunately, Riven selling can be a tedious and long-winded process. But the reward of doing so can be thousands and thousands of platinum if done in the correct manner, and is a bit of a learned process once you get used to it. And even if you feel like you got a bad roll, sometimes it just won't sell because either no one's using the Riven or maybe no one at that given time is looking for it. I once had a godlike Nikana Riven, and in a normal situation would have been snapped up for 500 platinum with no consideration whatsoever. But because at the time a new weapon had been released in a similar category as the Nikana, everyone was spending their platinum on those Rivens, and no one really cared for the Nikana. Boo-hoo. So really, just remember selling Rivens is a pain in the ass and takes time and consideration over the processes themselves rather than the Riven itself. And as for the Veiled Rivens, they don't normally sell for much, but are always guaranteed to go quickly due to the fact they could have a Riven inside them that's worth far more than the Veiled Riven itself. And really, although you'll never get as much for a Veiled Riven as an Unveiled Riven, it is at the very least more guaranteed income, especially if you can't be bothered to open the test. A couple of things we can do here to help you understand whether a Riven has rolled into something worthwhile or not. And really it comes down to a couple of different factors. The first being the weapon itself that it's rolled for. More popular weapons, such as Eidolon hunting weapons or new weapons, are always going to be of high value as people want to try out the nice shiny new thing. So you're always guaranteed to sell a Riven for a much higher price if the weapon has only recently come out, or has recently been primed. And one of the big defining factors of pricing a Riven is the disposition. Higher disposition means a weapon will become far stronger, and stronger generally equals a higher value. But there is, alas, the notion of niche weapons that just one or two people like, but still not selling for a lot. At the end of the day, if a weapon is not used that much in the grand scheme of Warframe's community, there won't be that many people looking for it. And those people who do want it won't be willing to pay as much for an underloved Riven. The amount that a Riven has been rolled will also play a big factor as to how much it's worth, and this is where it gets a little bit on the weird side. People will often pay a little bit above the base value of a Riven if it's not been rolled at all, even if it's a terrible, hideously ugly roll. This is because they can then try to roll it to a god roll, utilizing the lower cost of Kuva to roll it, making a higher bank for themselves in the process once they sell it at the better roll it gets. And often, this should be taken into consideration when you first unveil a Riven, because unrolled, you are going to have a unique opportunity to have a much higher chance of selling it easier. But that's the risk. Sell it unrolled easier for less, or roll it a few times at cheap Kuva cost and hope for a better roll. This is where the capitalization on the Warframe marketplace and understanding trade semantics comes into a very big play. And finally, and the most important of all of these, are the stats themselves. So to keep in mind, the stats a Riven gets, if they are more relevant to the weapon, the more likely they're going to be sought after. And the way to determine if a Riven is going to be viable or not is the following. If it gets some of the generalized good rolls, such as the melee, attack speed, or range. Attack speed and range will generally be good across the board because they are going to be generalized in improving all damage because they affect all forms of damage output. Or like with your ranged weapons, getting multi-shot or just raw base damage alone will be a guaranteed increase of raw damage. However, if you get specialized weapons, such as crit-based weapons, you're going to want those alongside crit rolls. So let's take the Rubico, for example. The Rubico is a single-fire sniper rifle with high crit chance and high crit damage. In an ideal roll, we want multi-shot to duplicate the high base damage. That's amazing. That's going to increase all of our base damage and increase the value. Then we want crit chance and crit damage because it's what this weapon excels in already. So that's guaranteed improving what the weapon's already strong in. Additionally to that, you can then look at the tertiary stats, which would then be things like raw damage or element damage. The things you generally want to avoid are things like the IPS damages because they're not as required or sought after in the grand scheme of things. At the end of the day, damage is damage. and damage will always increase the value, especially when it's in the specialization of that weapon. So in an ideal world, every Riven can have 4 stats. The first 3 of these stats that you can possibly get will always and generally be a benefit or a positive to the weapon, such as bonus to damage, bonus to multi-shot, or reduction of recoil. When valuing a Riven, you want as many of these 3 first stats to be as pertinently relevant as possible to a weapon. So for example, the Rubico, a quote-unquote god roll, would be multi-shot, crit chance, crit damage. And then the 4th stat is always going to be a negative for the weapon, something that will negatively impact the way the weapon functions. But it's not a bad thing, because if you get a 4th roll, a negative roll, it will increase the potency of your previous 3 stats. So if you get an ideal situation where you have a negative, you want that negative to be a neutral negative. Something like minus zoom or minus damage to a specific enemy type, because that is generalized and it's not going to be as negatively affecting as if you got negative multi-shot or negative raw damage. The idea is that it's polarized and you want to prioritize what is prioritized for the weapon and lose what is neutral. If it all sounds a bit waffly, that's because it is. There's a lot of weird notions that go into selling Rivens, and honestly, if you want the TLDR of it all, if a Riven is specifically working towards the speciality of a weapon, then it's going to do better. The more relevant the rolls are to the weapon, the more value it becomes, the more potent it becomes for that weapon. There is some subjectivity to personal preference and personal playstyle, but at the end of the day, if the Riven has damage and benefits to your damage, it's good. One final handy thing to note is if you have a bunch of Rivens you don't like anymore because they're looking at you funny, you can use a Riven transmuter to recycle unwanted Rivens. These Riven recyclers are obtained from capturing a Hydralist, which is the third and final Eidolon you get in the Eidolon hunts on Cetus. When combining a Riven recycler, you need 4 unveiled Rivens, and what you get out of that recycle is then based on what you put in. For example, each node you put in will equate to 25% of the chance. So if you put 2 rifle Rivens and 2 melee Rivens, you will have a 50% chance at a melee Riven and 50% chance at a rifle Riven, thus recycling what you might not have used and hopefully getting something that's more relevant. That's as much as you're going to need to know initially about Rivens. There's some more information that can be out there, but a lot of it comes down to personal preservation with this sort of stuff. Rivens are as simple or as complicated as you so choose. And honestly, they're not nearly as fundamental to the game as you may be led to believe. You don't need Rivens to complete the game. They're just something that you can utilize to maybe make a bit of spare cash or excel some of your weapons to a level that they might not have been able to reach. And at the end of the day, if you don't like a Riven, you can always dissolve it for endo like you do your regular mods in your modding station. But that would be a bit of a waste, wouldn't it? So, whether you utilize Rivens, whether you just sell them, whether you never use the damn things, or whether you just want to make a bit of platinum off them, hopefully this guide has been informative for you. If you feel like joining us on our Twitch channel, where we record these videos daily with your input, then you are welcome to come and join us. There will be a link to my Twitch and my Twitter below the stream. If you could give those a follow to keep up to date with what we do on a day-by-day basis, that'd be super cool. And, of course, if you want to come and join us, you are welcome to. We stream daily with the emphasis of community, and in fact, as of recording this video, we're doing a charity stream where we're raising money for a good cause. So, with that being said, thank you for watching this video. Leave a like, share to your pet gimp, I think. And if you could, make sure you drop this to your friends as well. And I'll see all of you top hatters in the next video. Ta-ra!